Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of live career webinars brought to you by the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal. That is a website that we hope that you will be familiar with or that you will start using. So HOP stands for the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal. It is a website that will share with you lots of information that we think is particularly relevant for young people in Hertfordshire who want to find out more about particular careers. So today we are going to be exploring careers in teaching, which I'm sure you've all got really good access to great role models at the moment through your teachers at school. But today we've got a really diverse panel who are covering primary teaching in early years, secondary school teaching, and also teaching in a special educational needs setting as well. So first of all, I'm going to introduce you to our panel and I'm going to ask them to tell you just a little bit about themselves to set the scene, and then I will explain to you a little bit more about how the webinar is working, and then we will get cracking with the questions that we have. So firstly, Amy, would you like to introduce yourself please to the audience?
Yes, my name is Amy Parker and I am currently doing my initial teacher training in a primary school at Wormley Primary. So I teach in reception and I undertook a degree in primary education studies, and my A-levels I took in school were English literature, food technology and drama and theatre studies.
Okay, thanks very much, Amy. And Alan, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about you.
Yep, so I'm Alan. I am a science teacher at Thomas Alleyne in Stevenage. I have a degree in marine biology, spent a few years working in an office before training to become a teacher. So I now teach age groups from 11 to 16-year-olds, mostly biology, but all sciences as well.
Okay, thank you. And Sean, good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Sean. I'm an English teacher at Thomas Alleyne Academy as well. I have an undergraduate degree in English literature, and then I did a master's in English, and I was a bit of a career changer, so I had a few years off working in other industries, and then I trained and qualified to teach 2 years ago now, so I'm in my third year of teaching.
Okay, thank you. And finally, good afternoon, Charlie. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Charlie Osborne. I work in a special school for children with severe learning difficulties and profound multiple learning difficulties. I've been teaching for nearly 6 years now, and I've always been in special needs. Even though my degree is in primary education, I'm just really lucky that I had the wonderful experiences I had as part of my training and the work experience I did before I chose where I was going to work.
Okay, thank you, Charlie, and thank you to all of you for giving those introductions. Now, the purpose of this webinar, for those of you that are watching this live at the moment, you're going to have the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists. So we're going to ask a number of questions and have a number of discussion areas, but we'd very much like to hear your questions. So you can submit those via the dashboard. So if you see there's a questions tab on there, if you click on that, that should open up a text box, and the text box will then give you the opportunity to type in a question. So if you want to submit a question, type it in there. If you want to ask the question to anyone specifically, just put their name at the start of it and then we will know to direct that to them. A few of you have already submitted questions through the registration, which was great, and we will definitely ask all of those. So do get those questions in as we go through. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded live. If you're unable to watch the whole of it, we'll probably be on here till about 4:30 today. If you're unable to watch all of it, it is being recorded though, so you will be able to watch it back. It will be on our HOP website, which I've spoken to you about earlier, but I will give you a reminder of it before we end today. And just to reassure you, we can't see or hear any of you that are watching live at the moment, but hopefully you can see and hear us. So then, going to move on to our first section of questioning then, which is really, it's to talk about what is teaching actually like to do. So I suppose my first question is, and we've got our panelists from a range of different school settings. So let me ask Amy first of all, when did you know that you wanted to teach primary school children rather than secondary school?
So it's probably when I was in secondary school. My sister had my nephew and my niece, and they were at the age of 4, and I realised that I could influence them and help them with their learning progression. So their reading, I had a lot of influence over their reading, and that's when I started to look at links for teaching. So that's mainly why I decided primary, because of that age group.
Yeah. Okay. And then, well, I suppose on the flip side of that, Sean, would you ever consider working in a primary school? Did you know that secondary school age children was always going to be right for you? And what were the sort of the factors that influenced that decision?
I don't think primary was something I would have ever considered. I think I like teaching secondary because I think one of the main differences, because I just teach my subjects and that's all I have to teach. And I think that's just what I'm in it for. So I enjoy teaching English all day, every day to a range of students and not having to split myself with other areas of curriculum. Also, I think with teenagers as well, they're closer to leaving school and going off into their jobs and their careers. So I like to think like what we're doing at secondary is leading them a bit more directly to that, and maybe following the subjects we teach and just really sort of following that.
Sure. And then, I mean, Alan, is that the same for you? Could you envisage working with the primary school age children and covering sort of various subject areas?
Yeah, I think I'd echo really what Sean said. For me, I enjoy teaching science. That's what I enjoy teaching, and having that kind of focus on a subject that I personally enjoy doing, and hopefully that is kind of seen by my students, because I enjoy it, they're going to enjoy it as well. And I think that's really quite important with that kind of thing, and hopefully spread kind of the passion for science is the idea.
For sure. Now, Charlie, you've gone down a slightly different strand or different avenue of teaching. So first of all, tell us what is an SEN school, and then tell us, how did you find your way into SEN teaching?
So an SEN school, it's a special educational needs school. It's for children who have an educational healthcare plan for special educational needs. For us, we have a lot of children with autism, but we cover the 2 to 19 age range. So they could come to us at that really young age and stay with us all the way until they then would transition to a special needs college. I am really lucky. My mum is a teaching assistant in a special school, very similar to the one I work in. And when I knew I wanted to be a teacher from like day one. I think I used to line up my teddies and teach them at home. So I wanted to do my primary education degree because I thought that's really quick and I'll get into teaching. But I took a job when I was 19 as a supply TA at the school my mum works at, and I just fell in love with that way of teaching. It's completely different to me how we teach in an SEN school to how you teach in a mainstream school, and I've done a bit of both as part of my training, but because I just fell in love with it, I just decided straight away, NQT, straight into special needs. It was quite a steep learning curve, but you know, because I feel like I'm giving back to those kids, it was all worth it in the end, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, I can see that must be very, very rewarding. Now, I know that there are 19 special educational needs schools in Hertfordshire with children of secondary school age. So that, you know, that's a lot of teachers across the county that are working in an SEN setting. Just, I mean, you had some exposure to it because you said your mum worked in an SEN school. Do you think many newly qualified teachers or teachers going through the undergraduate degree program are aware of SEN as an option and strand of teaching, Charlie?
I don't really think so. I know that part of the undergrad degrees and the postgrad degrees in teaching, it's compulsory to do a placement in a special school to get the experience, because a lot of what we do in special schools is still useful for mainstream schools. You know, little things like the visual support that we use for our students with autism, it's really easy to take that and use it in a mainstream setting. But I think a lot of people go into teaching with the mindsets that Amy, Alan and Sean go into, thinking, oh, I'd love to give to these kids, and you know, the reading thing with your niece and nephew, absolutely lovely. And you know, if you're really passionate about a subject and you want to teach it and inspire secondary age children to also feel that passion, I mean, it's amazing. And I think every strand of teaching gives such a wonderful thing to all the young people. But yeah, like I say, special needs is not on a lot of people's radars. I think unless people are aware of it, like whether they've got family members with special needs or they've specifically looked into it, it's not something a lot of people go into teaching to do.
Yeah, I mean, Amy, you're still a trainee teacher. So was it something you were aware of, that this was a strand that perhaps you could have gone into?
Not until I did my degree. I didn't realise how many additional needs we'd have in a classroom. So at the moment in my classroom, I have approximately about 10 children with some sort of additional need. So my training course actually offers me to go and experience a SEND school, but I haven't been able to do that yet because of COVID. So I think it would be really helpful. But yeah, no, it's something I have considered as well, but I really like primary. So,
for sure. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm just interested, Amy, you're teaching in reception class, but at what point did you choose which key stage within primary school you wanted to teach? Because presumably there's a different skill set. It's a different sort of person that wants to go and teach even year sixes and preparing them to go in to be taught by Mr. Greenall and Mr. Risdon.
Yeah, no, I thought I'd be in year 4. I thought year 4 would be the classroom that I'd like. It wasn't until I volunteered in quite a few schools and I experienced the different year groups that I preferred the early years. So I would say I would definitely recommend volunteering in schools just to see where you'd prefer to be, and as well as to get to build relationships with those schools.
Sure. Okay, well, just going to move the conversation on a little bit. So let me go to Alan for this question. What are the most enjoyable aspects of teaching?
I think most people would say, and they might sometimes say it's the least enjoyable bit too, but it's working with the kids every day. It is the best thing, without a shadow of a doubt. And when they get something that they didn't understand before, or you're teaching something and all of a sudden they remember something from a few lessons ago that you didn't know that they knew still, and it's kind of really rewarding, that kind of thing. And to kind of see them gaining that knowledge and growing in that kind of thing, it's so rewarding. It is the best thing about teaching, for sure.
Sure. Charlie, is that the same for you?
Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky. We have classes of around 10 children, so we get to know them really well, and quite often they'll stay with us for a few years. There's actually a young lady in my class I've been teaching for as long as I've been a qualified teacher. She's followed me from one school to another, and seeing her make the progress she's made from the age of 9 to where she is now is just phenomenal. And it makes all those bad days like go away in a way, because it's amazing and it's so rewarding, and it's why we do what we do. We want to make an impact on those young people's lives for the better. And knowing that, she's gone from not being able to sit down and concentrate on even one piece of learning to being able to sit down, iPad screen turned off, do 3 activities and then go back to it. It's a huge step, and it makes you feel amazing at the end of the day.
Sure. Now, when we talk about careers, and perhaps we try and give young people advice about careers, now whatever they want to do, we talk about really considering what the benefits are and what the enjoyable aspects of the role are. And Sean, let me bring you in, because you haven't always been a teacher, have you? You've done something very, very different before. So now that you can compare teaching to, I guess, a non-teaching role, what do you think the benefits are connected to teaching that you just wouldn't get in another industry?
I think the benefits echo what Alan and Charlie have already said. It's just so rewarding, like every single day, knowing you're making an impact on someone's day, someone's life, teaching them something new. I think we can all agree, all of our settings, they're very challenging, very difficult for different reasons. But I think what gets us through it is every day we know we've made an impact on a young person's life, and that makes it all worth it. And it's just so rewardable.
Yeah. Sure. Look, I've got to ask the flip question now, and I'll go to Amy first of all. But the challenging sides of the role. So, what are the things that perhaps you wouldn't have been aware of when you were considering being a teacher when you were maybe 16 or 17? What are the things that perhaps people aren't aware of that do make the role difficult?
Probably the work-life balance. You always have a to-do list, And even when you cross one bit off your list, you'll add 2 more. It's just a constant ongoing to-do list. But you can get over that. You just have to learn how to prioritise what's more important. But I would definitely say work-life balance. Yeah.
Sure, and I appreciate that I'm contributing to that by asking you guys to be on this webinar today. But Alan, can you just elaborate on that a little bit? What are the things that are constantly on your minds, whether you're in school or whether you're at home, that perhaps people wouldn't be aware of if they weren't teachers?
Things like marking work. Today I've had 4 classes. I've set 2 of them homework. I'm going to have to collect all of that in and mark all of that at some point. Things like planning lessons. So you can't just go into a lesson. You need to know what you're teaching the next day. You need to know what's in it, and you need to know it really, really well. I mean, I've always known a lot of the content that I'm teaching, but you've got to know it, and then you've got to know a little bit more as well, because you're going to be asked questions that you're not even expecting, and questions that you might not even know the answer to, but you've got to know it well enough that you can respond to the questions when you get in them.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously something that you cover within your training. So, Sean, let me ask you this question first of all. I guess it's one thing knowing the subject knowledge. It's one thing being able to organise yourself and to get your marking done and to plan your lessons. But for me, the thing that I would say is being the biggest challenge would be that behaviour management. So what do you do with your year 10 class that you know are going to be an absolute nightmare? At what point do you learn that and that stops becoming a challenge to you?
Honestly, that takes time. I think a lot of it is just relationships, like getting to know your students as a trainee. And I think being a few years in, it's a lot easier now, but it is one of the biggest challenges, because I think we all know what it's like to be in a class, whether we were a student or as a teacher. They're very naughty, and it seems impossible at first, but I think it's about perseverance and sort of just sticking with it, and it comes naturally with time. It is one of the most difficult parts of teaching, I would say, but it sort of resolves itself, I think.
Yes. And then behaviour management for you, Sean and Brallan, would be very different to sort of behaviour management, or I'm not going to say behaviour management, maybe classroom management. Amy, is that something that you found a challenge, or perhaps challenges you weren't aware of?
Not really. So the school I work in has a really good behaviour policy. So we work with pro-social behaviour, so rewarding good behaviour, good sitting, and just setting high expectations. But I have a class of 30 that I see every day for a whole year. So building those relationships are really key.
Yeah, sure. And then Charlie, from your perspective, anything else with it through the sort of prism of your day-to-day role that perhaps people aren't aware of?
So in a special school, we tend to have a large team of teaching assistants or learning support assistants. And one thing that I was not prepared for from my degree was people management. So the class I work in now, I have 7 LSAs and 2 MSAs, so midday supervisory assistants. And on top of trying to manage, the learning of the children, I've then got to manage the staffing so that the children who need one-to-one support have got that, but also that those staff know what they're doing. It's referred to as satellite teaching. So making sure that each child's lesson within that lesson is set up and ready to go. But yeah, people management did not come naturally to me at first. I very much was worried about everyone liking me. And one of the things you have to accept as a teacher, I think, is that you have to make decisions that not everyone is going to like, especially as you climb higher in the sort of managerial aspects of it. So I've gone from being that brand new teacher to now being the sensory coordinator for the whole school. And I have to impact each and every class, and whether they like it or not, the decisions I make are about the children. They're not about the people who have to provide those things for the children.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, well, look, there's lots of really interesting insight there, and I'm sure that may well trigger some questions from our audience. So do get those questions coming in if you just joined us. We will ask all the questions that you submit to our panel today. I'm just going to move the conversation on now a little bit towards, well, how do you actually become a teacher? Charlie, I'm going to go to you first. I know you're quite literally a student of this and the development of teaching. So can you just explain the different paths that someone would take depending on whether they think they want to be a primary school teacher or a secondary school teacher from, let's kind of take it from A-levels onwards.
Okay, so at A-level, whether you want to be primary or secondary, you need to consider the subjects really hard. For primary, you need to have studied one of the core subjects, which would be a maths, English or science, any science. But for secondary, you need to be thinking about the subject that you would like to teach, and you need to have studied that at A-level. And again, regardless of the pathway, to be a teacher, you must have a degree and qualified teacher status. So, I mean, generally, I think secondary teachers do a degree in the subject they wish to teach and then go on to do a PGCE, which is the university-led route into teaching. It's a one-year full-time course, and you go through, it's really like intense 1 year's training to be a teacher, and then you receive qualified teacher status at the end of that. Whereas for primary, you've got other options. You can do a primary education degree, which I did, and I believe Amy did. It's 3 or 4 years, depending where you do it. It can be a bachelor's in arts or a bachelor's in education. And like I say, 3 or 4 years training, and then you receive QTS at the end of that. Or you may have decided you want to study something else entirely and do work experience in other areas and really get real world experience before you settle into teaching. And from there, you can either choose to do a PGCE in primary or secondary, or there's the school direct route where you can either work salaried or unsalaried in a school of your choosing, but they obviously have to sponsor you and support you. You do a training year with them and receive your qualified teacher status after. With the school direct route, it's more school-led, so you spend a lot more time in school. Our current trainees that we have here at Lakeside are they have 1 day out a week where they're taught at university, whereas with a PGCE, you would initially be in learning about teaching, so the pedagogy and the subject knowledge and the behaviour management, some of the basic stuff, before you would then go on to be in a school setting. And I believe that with the PGCE, you do 3 different placements and you do go into different schools each time. So you get a broad experience of different settings, and then you get to work with different people and see lots of different examples of teaching. Whereas with the school direct route, you're in that school and you stay in that school, and the idea behind it is that you would then stay with that school to do your NQT year and stay working there.
Sure, thank you. That's a really, really good overview. I think you can take a deep breath now as well. Let's try and do this in some sort of logical way. So Amy, let me start with you. So you knew, I think before you chose your A-levels, that you wanted to go into primary school teaching, and you said that you did English literature, drama and theatre studies and food tech. So talk us through the decision you had to make about which university you were going to go to and which degree you wanted to do.
So a lot of research. I know fellow of my friends have done a couple of educational courses as well. So I knew I kind of wanted to do a direct route. So I went to Anglia Ruskin University. So I researched, it's in Cambridge, Anglia Ruskin. So I researched the university, looked at the course details. Quite a lot of that can be just found on UCAS. So, yeah, that was really.
And what would have been your second choice? Did you have lots of options?
You get to pick 3 options. So I picked, I think it was a University of Bedfordshire. It's quite a little while ago. And that was an education studies course. So that was just a general education studies.
Yeah, Okay, and I mean, it sounds like you looked at universities that were quite close to home. So did you stay at home whilst you were studying, or did you go and stay on campus?
I stayed at home. I stayed at home when I was at university. Yeah.
Sure, but
And I was volunteering in schools local to my area. So
yeah.
I volunteered here at this school. And that's why I've built quite a close relationship with them, and that they offered me to do my initial teacher training here.
Sure. Okay, fine. So that's primary school teaching and the degree that Amy chose. And so both Amy and Charlie may well have some more opinions. So if you have any questions on specific degree courses to choose, do submit those in there. Let's go to, well, both Alan and Sean. You, of course, it wasn't always the plan, was it, to go into teaching? You've done other things first of all. So Alan, just tell us about the degree that you chose and at what point you thought that maybe teaching was where you wanted to go with it.
Yeah, so teaching wasn't something I had in mind when I was picking my degree course. What I actually wanted to do was some kind of lab work or environmental work, and that's why I did a marine biology degree. It was a bit later after that I chose to get into teaching, but I chose something with the idea of doing lab work or something like that. I went to the University of Hull back at a time when they had a campus up in Scarborough, so that's where I was based to do my course. But actually deciding to do teaching, something that I wanted to do. So I did my work experience all the way back when I was about 14 in a primary school, and I loved that. And I always knew that it was something that I might want to do in the future, but it was a little bit later that I thought, actually, no, this is what I want to do. So it was after my degree that I made that decision.
Yeah. And then can you talk us through the process? So you've got your degree, you then decide that you want to go into teaching. So what's the application process for actually then qualifying and learning the teaching element?
Yeah, so the first kind of step was I kind of did my research. I went to the normal places, so I know you're going to send the links over, but we went through the Get Into Teaching website, and there was plenty of people who offered me advice there about what I needed to do. And it started off me going into a school. So I went into another school in Stevenage called Barnwell, and I spent, I think it was 2 days in there observing lessons, seeing what I wanted to do. And from there, I applied to do a PGCE at the University of Hertfordshire. I did a schools direct, so I was based in Barnwell School, and Thomas Alleyne's was actually my second placement, which is where I work now. So I applied for my PGCE at the University of Hertfordshire, and I did that year where you spend 4 days in a school, 1 day going into university. And yeah, that was the case up until till COVID hit. But yeah, that's the way it kind of works for me. And it was last year that I did that, my PGCE.
Okay, and then Sean, I know you've been on a fairly similar trajectory to that as well. What's that PGCE element like? Are you getting support from a tutor at the same time? Are you being mentored? When do you first get your own class full of students that you're left alone with? What's the process?
I'm sorry, was that to me? I froze.
Yes, sorry, Sean. Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just, if you could explain to what the PGCE process is. Are you being tutored? Are you being mentored alongside? How does that work?
Yeah, right. So my course was uni-led. So I think with the school direct and the uni-led PGCE, because they're both awarded for the university, they're actually really similar. So like Alan, I would go to school 4 days a week. Every week, and then 1 day a week I'd be at uni, and that would be split into 2 halves. So we'd do 2 different modules, and like one would be pedagogy, so like theory of teaching, learning about learning styles, and then the other would be subject specific. So we'd have like an afternoon session for me, about how to teach English effectively and like strategies for that. I think the main difference between the uni-led and the schools direct was that, so for Alan, he would have a 6-week placement at second school and go back to his original school, but for the uni-led, I spent September to December in one school, which was this school where I'm currently teaching at Thomas Alleyne's, and I spent 6 months at a second school. And yeah, that's pretty much how that works. You do assignments 3 points through the year, and then you're a teacher.
And here you are today. Charlie, I just want to move on we've spoken about qualifications, but the other thing that I'm really interested in, I mean, everyone can be very well qualified, but what are the actual skills and qualities that someone needs to teach? I mean, I guess all the way from Amy working with 4-year-olds to potentially working with 18-year-olds about to go to university, or even working in an SEN setting. What are those sort of fundamental skills or qualities that someone needs to have? Because we can often overlook those.
I think everyone will agree that you have to have a lot of patience. Regardless of your setting, you have to understand that the people you are teaching are all learning, and you have to have the patience to allow them to learn at the pace that they are learning at. I think empathy is very important as well. I mean, that's especially being in an SEN school, we have to, you know, think of each child individually. But if someone comes into your classroom, regardless of your setting, and they're not looking their usual self, having the empathy to understand that they may be having a bad day and be able to sort of adjust how you deliver your teaching to them, it can make such a huge difference to that person's day. They're the two biggest ones, I think, but being organized is hugely important, as Amy said. It doesn't matter what setting you're in, the paperwork's different in mainstream and special, but there's still a lot of it, and you have to keep on top of it, because, I mean, I remember the nights I'd be up just trying to finish all those lesson plans and reports because I hadn't been able to keep up with it during the day, and it needed to be in. You know, I'm sure, you know, those of you doing coursework know the feeling, and yeah, it's very important to keep on top of that side of things. And I think it's really important to have, as a teacher, an understanding of child development. Doesn't matter, again, whether you're in special, mainstream, early years, secondary, you need to know how people grow and develop as human beings and how you're supporting that.
Sure, thank you. Sean, anything to add to that? Are there any skills or qualities that you maybe brought in from your previous employment prior to teaching that you think are useful, or perhaps things that resonate with you when you see your colleagues displaying them?
I think so. I worked in hospitality and I was in management. So I think working with people was a definite advantage, and I think just building what Charlie said, just knowing not to take things personally because you don't know what's happened in their day. And I think at a secondary level, we've got some students who what's going on at home isn't always the best place for them, and they come to school as a safe space. So when they might act out, it's not to do with you, and they're being in your classroom is the place that they're okay. And I think just being able to work with people, read into them and respond to them on a human emotional level, and just taking it step by step and just being there for people and being kind, I think it's the most important stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Amy, from a primary school perspective, you've got, well, I know from personal experience, you've got some fabulous colleagues that you work alongside. What do you notice from them? What's been your takeaway from observing them? What are the sorts of skills and qualities they bring?
So they're very reflective in what they do. They always reflect after a lesson, and that's really key in teaching. And you're constantly getting observed by other teachers too. But I think I've learned most of my teaching methods from those colleagues. So all about the behaviours and all about how they control their class.
Yeah, so I mean, all of you have got some really good peers and mentors within your schools, haven't you, that you learn from and you pick those things up with. Okay, just going to move the conversation on. Now, normally this is the section where we talk about the prospects for this industry and just try and reassure everybody that the career they're interested in there's going to be a need for it in the future. Now, we don't need to do that for teaching, because of course there's always going to be huge demand for teaching. But Alan, are there some areas of teaching, I'm thinking specifically in secondary school at the moment, subject-wise, that schools struggle to recruit for?
Yeah, there definitely is. There are certain departments where there's going to be more teachers in them. So by that sense, you're going to need more teachers. And these tend to be the ones that bursaries are offered for. So things like science, maths, English, I think modern foreign languages was on there last time I looked. as well. So those kind of subjects, the ones that they're looking for, they're giving bursaries for, are the ones that they're looking to recruit teachers for. They're finding it hard to find them.
Sure. And then Charlie, I mean, through your studies, where are there gaps? I mean, from an SEN perspective, is that an area that there's going to be greater need for the staff and teachers in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, the way the SEN population has changed over the last few years, even as I've been teaching, they're expanding schools. We need lots and lots of teachers, but the key thing for SEN is you really have to have a passion for it. And I think that's one of the most difficult things. If you're not interested in it, or if it's not something you're comfortable doing, it's not for you. And I think it's really important to know that as well. You know, for me, I absolutely loved it and I wanted to do it, and I had the passion to go and do it. And that covers a lot of the bad days when things aren't going your way. You still have to have the passion to want to do it, and those kids really need someone that wants to be there. And I'd say the same for all kinds of school. You have to want to be a teacher. Yeah. But in terms of needing teachers, absolutely. I know that the research I've been doing at the moment shows that the government have pulled funding for the primary school direct salaried route. So there's less demand for primary school teachers from the government's perspective, but there's so many opportunities and ways of doing teaching and getting into teaching these days that I think there's always going to be a demand, regardless of whether you want to be an art teacher, a geography teacher, an early years specialist, or a special school teacher.
Yeah. Okay. Amy, just thinking about career progression, I mean, you're at the very start of your journey at the moment. Do you see your future mapped out for you? Do you think you'll stay in early years for the rest of your career, or you're ambitious? Do you want to become a head teacher one day? What was the sort of the natural career path for you?
I'd like to become an early years leader. I feel like that's one of what I want to progress into for an early years phase leader. But it's up to the head teacher. 1 year she could say you're in nursery, and the next year she could just ask you to move into year 6. So there would always be opportunity to develop in different areas in school.
For sure. Alan, from your perspective, you've obviously come from industry and then gone into teaching. I mean, I just wondered, do you find that, does that happen the other way around? Do people leave teaching because of the skills and knowledge they've acquired and then perhaps go into other career routes?
That's a good question. That isn't something that I know of. I'm sure it does happen. It's not. I don't know anyone personally who has done that, but I'm sure that's got to be something. There are a lot of skills that would be transferable. So that ability to stand in front of a class, that ability to communicate with people, is going to be a skill that is transferable in the real world. And so all the skills that we said that you need to be a teacher are going to be similar skills that you're going to need to do other jobs in life. So I'm sure that it would give you a good advantage going on if that's the way you went.
Sure. And then, I mean, Sean, like Alan, you come from industry and you've gone into teaching. Are the structures, you know, sort of in a really good place that you know what your progression would be as a teacher going forwards?
Yeah, I think in that respect it's really good. It's quite stable. Like you can know if you want to progress, you know what sort of ladder you're going to climb. I think in secondary, because we have a lot more pupils, there's sort of 2 routes you can go. You can sort of go up on a departmental level, going towards like head of department and like curriculum leader, or you've got pastoral towards like head of years sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's very clear if you want to progress, it's very clear like what directions you can go. And what I found is everyone is really supportive in your career progression. So if you want to progress, that opportunity is always there for you, and everyone is happy to help you go further.
Sure. And I guess you've also got the sort of the relative luxury that once you're a qualified teacher, if you relocate to another part of the country, or I guess even internationally, globally, there's going to be a job for you, isn't there, Charlie? Is that something that happens quite regularly? Do people, move around and?
I think, it's people's circumstances, but like you say, wherever you go, there's going to be jobs for teachers. In terms of international teaching, you need to watch out that you've taken the correct training route. A lot of international courses will not accept BAs. They would rather have a BEd. So it's something to consider. I mean, I remember looking at jobs in New Zealand, and I was like, thank goodness I did a BEd, not a BA. But yeah, and just a side note, really, in SEN, career progression tends to happen faster. We've found, I've been teaching, this is my 6th year now, and I'm already working at a whole school management level. I've gone from being that NQT to being a subject lead. I now subject lead 2 different curriculum areas. I also have been the head of my department. I'm one of the designated teachers for safeguarding. Because it's such a small school, there's not as many teachers. Those roles still need filling, and as a young teacher, you are more likely to very quickly climb the career ladder compared to perhaps a much bigger secondary school.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Okay, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that particular section. What we're going to do now is we're going to start going to the questions that have come in. So there's been some questions that have been submitted in advance of this session through the registration, and there's some that have come in since we've started this webinar at 3:30. So we will go through all of those. Just want to go through the ones that came in advance first of all. So we may well have covered it, but is teaching something you would consider going into as your first professional job? So, well, let me throw that one to Alan, because of course you didn't. If your time came again, do you think you'd go straight into teaching?
I definitely would. I think it is certainly something that could be your first professional job, and I think for quite a lot of teachers that is the case. It is a good thing, I think, to have a little bit of experience outside of it as well. So it's not an issue if it is your second job. But yeah, I think it's absolutely fine to go straight into it as long as you understand what you're getting into, really.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Charlie, I'm going to ask you this question. Is there a course at university specifically for teaching? Well, I think we probably answered that because you've said the course that you did and that Amy did, but how many different courses are there that would get you to the same endpoint? I think specifically within primary teaching.
So primary teaching, you can do the BEd or the BA, primary education degree, and there's a few different variations on that. There are early years specialisms, there are sort of key stage 1-2 specialisms, and those will lead you to having qualified teacher status. However, you could choose to do education studies, which will cover similar aspects, but it will not lead you to having qualified teacher status, and you'd then need to go on to do a PGCE or a school direct course in order to then qualify as a teacher.
For sure. Okay. Next one, I'm going to ask this one to Sean. As an NQT, are there lots of opportunities after or during uni for placements or jobs, or do you have to find the experience yourself?
As an NQT, to find other placements, is that? Yeah.
So when you were doing your PGCE, was it you that had to find the school that you wanted to go and work in, or was that just part of the course that they would allocate one for you?
Okay, so yeah, it's a bit different. When you're doing your PGCE, if you're uni-led like I was, the university arranges where your placements are. So they factor in where you're located. So like I'd say what postcode I lived in, and they try not to be too far, and they'll give you a contrasting setting for your second placement. If you're going a school direct route, you typically apply direct to a school. They'll advertise on their website, we're looking for a trainee for next year, so you can do it that way. When you're an NQT, that's sort of like your first post of employment, so you don't really choose placements. That's just where you've got a job and you're working.
Sure. And then Amy, from your perspective, you've obviously stayed fairly local. How much choice have you had in which schools you were either placed at or have worked at?
Well, at the moment it's been a bit difficult because of COVID, so I am meant to have a contrast set in a different school, but that won't happen. So I'll go into a different year group and teach in a different year group. But if COVID hadn't happened, then I would have been able to go and experience a different placement. But they work my course works quite closely with different schools, so we just swap around with the students.
Yeah, no, okay. And then, well, I think we've answered the last one about characteristics and personality traits. So let me go to the questions that have come in. So if you are watching this live and you want to submit questions, you've still got time to do so. We've had some really good questions come in so far, which I'm going to ask now. So let me go to Sean first for this one. Do you find it extremely difficult to teach a certain age group in secondary school? Do you think that's specific to the year group themselves, or is there a number that makes it that you automatically be wary of?
I think it's more the year groups itself, as in there'll be different classes in different year groups. I think generally I really enjoy teaching year 7. It's sort of like the best of primary and the best of secondary, teaching English all day long to the little eager ones. I think year 9, I'd say, probably is where it can get a bit challenging because they're not quite settled in where they are with their GCSEs. And I think, I think for me, that's the trickiest sort of time. I don't know if Alan agrees, but for me, start of Key Stage 3, end of Key Stage 4.
Well, let me put that question to Alan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say, yeah, year 9 maybe. Some groups in year 10 and year 8 can be tricky as well. It's more down to the groups that you have and the way that you're kind of managing your classroom, I think, more than anything else. But yeah, maybe more. The year 7s tend to be really keen and really eager. And then the year 10s and 11, it's getting a little bit more serious. So they tend to be taking it a little bit more seriously, especially towards the end of year 11. So it's kind of those in-between years where it's a little bit more tricky.
Sure. Well, when I was at, this won't mean much to our audience, probably won't mean much to Charlie or Amy as well, but when I was at school, year 9 was referred to by English teacher as the Beavis and Butthead year. So that's something to ask your parents about if you're watching that one. And I suppose, well, I suppose it's much like parenting as well, really, that I suppose different people, different colleagues that you've got will respond really well to those 17, 18-year-olds doing A-levels. But, well, to quote my history teacher, doesn't like year 7 children. And equally, it will work the other way around as well, won't it? So I suppose we all find our particular niche. And it depends on your subject area as well, I guess, that some subject areas maybe are only ever taught. So if you're an economics teacher, you'd probably only be seeing students at, at Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, wouldn't you? Whereas as English and science teachers, it's just a fact of life that you're going to be teaching everyone from 11 potentially up to 18. Yeah. Amy, you've said from a primary school perspective, I know that one was specifically about secondary schools, but from a primary school, you've said that year 4 was the age group that you thought or think that you perhaps most like to teach. Explain to me what the difference between maybe a year 6 group would be and a reception group would be, and the challenges of both.
Okay, so reception is a lot more about, there's so much more than teaching in reception. You are getting them to regulate their feelings, understand what their feelings are. You're also helping them to learn how to do things independently. I think quite a few people don't realise actually the amounts of learning that the children do in reception. This is where they first start reading. Whereas a year 6 class, you can see the progression from the reception age all the way up to year 6. Without the reception, without the input from a reception class, then they wouldn't be able to read and write. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. I think this is a really interesting question. So, I'll read it verbatim. Do you ever think you will be bored of being a teacher? Is there a shelf life of being a teacher, or do you kind of look at it and think, oh, well, I've taught this curriculum the last 4 years? Does it change, Sean?
No, I don't think I'd ever get bored of being a teacher. I think you can teach the same curriculum year after year, but the classes will always be different. So, and yeah, I don't think it's something you'll get bored of doing. I think if you ever leave teaching, it wouldn't be for boredom, definitely.
Sure. Charlie, from your perspective, can you get bored as a teacher?
No, there isn't time to get bored. Just today, I think, I hit my 10,000 step count before lunchtime. So, we're always busy running around on our feet. but the joy of working with people in general is that you get to work with such different characters and personalities, and it's so funny when you then get a new child who's like a child you've taught before, and you're thinking, oh god, it's going to be that all over again, but then oh, they're completely different because they're another human being. It's just wonderful. And honestly, I think some people are born teachers. I think some people grow to be teachers, but I think once you are a teacher, you know, no matter where you end up, you're going to have that part of your personality forever.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay. Next question, I'm going to ask you this one, Charlie, because you might know it because of what you're studying through your masters at the moment. If you can't, my colleague Carol, I've not done this before. My colleague Caroline, who's filtering and doing all the questions in the background, if she thinks she can answer it, then Caroline, do jump in on this one. So take yourself off mute and put the camera on. But let's see if Charlie knows the answer to it first of all. Is it possible to qualify as a teacher through an apprenticeship?
I think the school direct route is considered more of an apprenticeship route, but in order to do it, you need to have a degree. I think it depends when you go into teaching, and you know, if you're going in as a young person, they do expect that you've done your A-levels and a degree. Whereas if you go in as a more mature person, someone who's had real life experience and worked perhaps a long time as a teaching assistant or a learning support assistant and gain that experience, you're more likely to get onto a degree program without then having potentially the A-levels that someone who's 18 would need to have.
Yeah, no, okay. I mean, generally around apprentice, and Caroline, if you do want to add anything, and just turn your camera on so I know that you want to speak. But generally, apprenticeships are developing, massively in the country, and there are so many areas that you could do apprenticeships in now that you perhaps couldn't have done 5 or 10 years ago. So, I mean, the natural evolution of apprenticeships, I think, to me, would suggest that it's something they will look very closely at teaching with and see whether they can give that as a genuine alternative to university. But it would still almost be at that higher level degree level. Okay, well, Amy, I'm going to ask you this question first of all. There Caroline has popped up. So Caroline, is there anything you wanted to add on apprenticeships?
Only that I was doing a bit of Googling. They're quite limited at the moment, the apprenticeships, but they are available. They have been signed off. So I will do a bit more research on that and speak to Hertfordshire County Council, because they would be probably the recruiting organisation. So leave that one with me and I'll come back to you.
Kind of I'll watch this space. Thank you, Caroline. Amy, someone's written in here, I'm currently taking economics, sociology and photography A-level. Would I not be able to do primary teaching as there are no core subjects, or is there any other way?
I think as long as you've got a GCSE in the grade above C, or is it grade 4 as well, in maths, science and English, that should be fine. I think you'd have to really research around it, around the course that you want to apply for, just to make sure.
Charlie,
it's generally advised. Yeah, it's generally advised by most universities under their requirements pages that they would prefer A-levels in, a core subject. But part of the process of getting into the universities is often maths, English, science tests. I remember when I was applying, I went to 5 different universities and had to do a lot of those tests. It was quite nice, feeling quite smug getting full marks on primary science. But yeah, they do really quite rigorously test those skills. I think there'll be programs out there that will welcome people with open arms with, really great A-levels. I think the grades themselves reflect your ability to learn and retain knowledge and information. So.
Sure. Okay, well, so I think the key message there is read very carefully, look at the UCAS, look at the specific universities and their course requirements to get onto their programs. But look, as Alan and Sean have, approved, you don't have to have your heart set and think you're going to go straight into teaching directly from university. There are other avenues and there are other pathways, no matter what A levels you do, of getting into there at a later point once you've got those qualifications. So thanks for that question. Next one, are there any summer schools or opportunities that offer experience in teaching for young people? And Charlie, perhaps slightly broader, what other experiences, or how can people gain experiences apart from a formal work experience placement of actually finding out what it's like to teach? Are there more informal ways of doing it, perhaps?
I think I'm trying to think back to what I was doing when I was at secondary school, which is, 10 years ago now. I mean, even I did my work experience in my own primary school, which was interesting, seeing it from a different perspective. I, instead of doing sport on a Wednesday afternoons, did work experience and volunteered in a local primary school. But I think, when you're in secondary school, it depends the structure of the schools. They're all so different. I went to a school that had a sixth form attached within it. And I was a prefect, and I mentored a class of year 8s while I was in year 12. And I think being part of, cross-year group activities and, being that slightly older member of the team, being able to then take charge and look after those younger people, that's all good experience as well. And thinking about things like scouting, guiding, all those things, they're really helpful in terms of, it's about teamwork and being able to work with other people. But things like, we have young people come in from the local secondary school, they're sports leaders, and they come and work with our students, and it's absolutely lovely to watch, and they're experiencing something they wouldn't necessarily have got to experience in a mainstream setting. So they're discovering special needs, but through sport, and it's so much fun. We've taught them how to play volleyball with balloons. But yeah, all those things, like those little opportunities, just take them. If you can go and do library days where you read with young people, absolutely fantastic opportunity. And just, if you're intrigued by a school setting, and particularly I'm thinking of those year 11 and 12 students where you finish school with your GCSEs and AS levels, you've got a bit more time in the summer while the other schools are still in, go volunteer and go experience different schools, go experience different age groups, and just see how you get on. I remember I did primary, I actually did secondary, which was terrifying, and I did special needs, and if I hadn't had all those experiences, I wouldn't have got to where I am today.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I would say, if you're interested in a school setting, everyone's really happy to help you. Send an email. Before I trained to teach, I emailed my old secondary school, and it had been 15 years since I left, roughly, and they're happy to have me back. And I spent 2 weeks observing, and it was really strange seeing my old English teacher.
Yeah, I mean, we have someone who's in charge of organising volunteers.
But they're happy to have you there and observe and see how everything works here at the school.
Yeah. Sorry, Sean keeps freezing. I don't know whether that is his old English teacher.
Sorry, I froze again.
Playing at the moment. But yeah, look, Charlie, you made a really good point there. I think that's a really good solution, a good suggestion as well. Contacting perhaps your old primary school, if that's the area that you want to go into, certainly through your school, I'm sure they would facilitate that. I'm sure Mr. Greenall would be more than happy for some year 11 or year 12 students to come and spend some time with him if it was COVID safe, to see how he copes with the year 7s, and likewise. So you've got a fantastic resource available to you, I think, to find out more about teaching. Sorry, Caroline has just responded to that question about the apprenticeships. there are 21 providers now delivering the level 6 apprenticeship in teaching, which that will always be linked to a university. Middlesex University appears to be the closest to us in Hertfordshire. So Middlesex is sort of North London, that's probably Enfield or surrounding area for that one. So if you do want to go and have a look at that one, have a look at Middlesex University. Perhaps just, I mean, Google apprenticeships in teaching, probably wouldn't take you too far from it. Just want to rattle through the last 3 questions. We just got to 4:30, and I know how much marking you've probably all got to do for tomorrow morning. So Amy, just one word answer. Which university did you say you studied primary education at?
Anglia Ruskin University. They do one in Chelmsford, but I went to the one in Cambridge.
Yeah, for sure. And we also know that our home university, University of Hertfordshire, also runs a primary education programme as well. Charlie's giving that the
that's the one I did.
And then, well, so there's 2 questions I want to finish on, and one's, I think, a really nice one to conclude with. So it's, well, the penultimate one, is there any way of becoming a primary school teacher if you haven't studied education at university? Now, I think you probably answered that, Charlie, that as long as you're prepared to do the PGCE top up, if you've got a degree, you can then go back and do that subsequently. So you haven't missed the boat if you want to do primary school education and you haven't done that there. But yeah, so final question that I'll ask. I think probably the other ones that have come in, we've largely covered them. Let me find it on there. What is the most memorable moment you have had teaching, perhaps with a student or with an individual student? So Charlie, over to you first of all, then I'm going to ask all 4 of you to conclude on this one.
Oh God. I mean, I've had a lot of memorable moments, but nice memorable moments, I would say, sorry, there's a lot of them. I had a young man who had a condition called pathological demand avoidance and autism. It's very severe on the autism spectrum, and he was quite a challenge to work with, but I will never forget the afternoon I spent with him in the quiet room that we have. He was learning parts of the body, and I had jelly as my resource that day, and I was going, right, where are we going to put this piece of jelly, because it's very sticky, it'll stick to anything. And I just remember when he said that he wanted it on his nose, and so I just stuck jelly on his nose, and oh, we laughed so hard. And for a child who struggles really hard with doing what's asked of him, it was just amazing, and it was so much fun. And you know, he's left our school now, but he's someone I'll never forget, and if I hadn't taught him, I wouldn't be the teacher I am today. So
I'm sure that's a lovely memory. Alan, what story do you dine out on then?
Oh, it's a tough one, because I'm still quite new to this, but I would say one of the best ones. So back in my training year, so last year when I was doing my PGCE, we took a group of students to do a PGL trip, a group of Year 7 students, and it was kind of my first chance. I'd only been training for about a month or so, so it was kind of my first chance to get to know the students, and getting to see some of them who were so scared to do some of these little activities that they were trying to do, and things like zip wiring, things like that, and the kind of the pride in them actually getting up and doing it and climbing up to the top and jumping off of the top thing, something that they were previously scared of. I think that was incredible and something that will always stick in my mind.
Excellent. Sean?
Mine's probably a bit more soppy. I remember I had a student who I thought hated me, and just getting a thank you note at the end of the year for being a good teacher and helping him improve so much, just like knowing I actually made an impact on someone who I thought really didn't enjoy my lessons at all. And I think that's sort of makes it all worth it.
Lovely. And then Amy, I mean, you've got 30 little comedians, I know, every day, haven't you? There must be so many things that you could draw on at the moment, but anything that particularly sticks in your mind?
There was a recent one. During lockdown, I was teaching a small group of 6 children, and one child did not know any phase 2 phonic sounds. So that's the really basic beginners phonics. And I'd worked with him on a one-to-one intervention for about 3 weeks. And by the end of the 3 weeks, he could recognise all but 2 of the phonic sounds. So he knew all but 2, all of them. So that made me really happy. And he was really proud. His confidence really grew, and you could just tell that he was so much more confident with himself.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's really nice, because all of those experiences you've just described there tie in very nicely with the very first question we asked you, which was, what are the most enjoyable aspects of the job? So it's making that personal difference, isn't it, to a young person's life? And not only do you hope it sticks with them, clearly it has a profound effect on you as well, and it's something that you can take through with you as well. So you've described some really lovely moments there. Other questions that have come in, I mean, do you find your weekends are full of marking or planning? I mean, we spoke about work life and and balance earlier, so I guess yes, the conclusion to that is there is perhaps always is marking or something in your mind, but you must have a social life as well. Sean?
I think we touched on it earlier, just being more organised. I think when I was earlier into this, it was taking up a lot of my evenings and the weekends, but now my weekends are sacred. I won't do any work. It's about learning how to manage your time, and it is tough, but it does get better. So if any of you are going to become a teacher, it does get better. It starts difficult, but you will have your weekends eventually.
Excellent, good. Well, let's conclude that on a happy note there. Just want to make you aware of, this is usually where we share details of any website. So Charlie, could you just explain this website and how it might be useful for someone who wants to find out more about teaching?
Okay, so Get Into Teaching it's like a gold mine for information on how to become a teacher. So it'll explain all the different routes into teaching far more clearly than I probably have done. And there's a wealth of information. I believe there's even links to the correct UCAS pages on there. You've seen the adverts on TV, I'm sure. They're so clear, and you know, I believe it was Alan, did you say they helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was applying, I went onto that website, and they actually designated someone to me who talked through the whole application process and read through my application and that kind of thing. So it's a fantastic place to go to find out all the information and to get any help that you need applying.
Of course, and usually when we do this section, we list 4 or 5 different websites, but I think for all of you watching at the moment, you have got a almost limitless pool of resources available to you to find out about teaching, which are your teachers. So, I mean, really don't be shy to ask them about aspects of their career, or perhaps why they chose secondary above or above primary, and I'm sure usually they will be well contacted. And if you wanted to find out about working in an SEN school or working in a primary school, I'm sure there would be good links for you. So do have that dialogue with your teachers, and look, they're there to help you. They'll give you a very, very realistic understanding, as our 4 panelists have today, about what teaching is actually like and what it's actually all about. Before I conclude, let me just share with you this page here. That gives you the details for all of our HOP social media sites. So the HOP website is intended for use for young people and students in Hertfordshire. It will provide a whole wealth of information about different careers. All the webinars that we've been recording, we've done one of these pretty much every week since once a week since last summer. There's a whole variety of different careers covered within there. This video will be available probably Monday morning, so you can watch it back. You can share it with any family or friends that perhaps want to find out more about teaching as well. So just in conclusion, let me first of all thank all of you in the audience for submitting your questions. There's some really, really thought-provoking questions there, and I think they've generated some fabulous and really inspiring answers as well. But I think foremostly, thank you so much to our panel today for giving up their time, for taking a chunk out of their time that they'd probably be spending marking at the moment to do that. So to Amy Parker, Alan Greenall, Sean Risdon and Charlie Osborne, thanks so much to you for giving up your time and for sharing your experiences with us this afternoon. That's the end of the webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it really inspirational and really informative as well. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.